When 9-year-old Sophie Lombardi spotted the janitor playing chess alone during his lunch break, she did something that would change 3 lives forever. This wasn't just any janitor. This was Noah Brown, a single father working double shifts. To support his young son, playing with a battered chess set to escape the stress of his demanding life. And this wasn't just any building. This was Meridian Financial Tower, owned by Sophie's mother, Billionaire CEO Nora Ritchie, who had been secretly watching the entire encounter unfold from her executive suite. What started as an innocent challenge between a precocious girl and a humble janitor quickly revealed connections that none of them saw coming. The game that followed didn't just test their chess skills. It unraveled a web of secrets, sacrifice, and second chances that would redefine what family truly means. Sometimes the most powerful moves happen off the board. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The 47th floor of Meridian Financial Tower hummed with the quiet efficiency of corporate America at its finest. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the break room, offering a breathtaking view of the city sprawling below like a glittering circuit board. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors, and the air carried the faint scent of expensive coffee from the executive floors above. Noah Brown sat alone at a small round table tucked into the corner of the employee break room, his Navy janitor's uniform a stark contrast to the sleek modern furniture surrounding him. His weathered hands moved deliberately across a worn chessboard, the pieces showing years of use, some slightly chipped, others bearing the telltale signs of countless games. The white king had a small crack running down its side, and the black queen's crown had been glued back on more than once. At 34, Noah carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had learned to find pride in honest work, regardless of how others might perceive it. His dark hair was streaked with premature gray at the temples, testament to the sleepless nights and double shifts that had become his routine since his wife's death 3 years ago. The wedding ring on his left hand had grown loose from the weight he'd lost during those dark months, but he still wore it, a silent promise to the memory of the woman who had believed in him when no one else would. The chess set before him was a refuge, a small island of intellectual challenge in a sea of mundane tasks. He'd discovered the game in college, back when he thought he'd become a teacher, before life had other plans. Now these 30-minute lunch breaks were his sanctuary, the only time of day when his mind could escape the endless cycle of mopping floors, emptying trash cans, and maintaining the pristine image that Meridian Financial demanded. He was deep in concentration, working through a complex endgame scenario he'd seen in a chess book the night before, when a small voice cut through his solitude. "Are you playing by yourself?" Noah's head snapped up, startled. Standing about 10 feet away, partially hidden behind one of the modern art sculptures that decorated the break room, was a young girl. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old, with dark curly hair that fell past her shoulders, and inquisitive brown eyes that seemed far too knowing for someone her age. Her clothes were clearly expensive, a cashmere sweater in soft lavender, tailored dark jeans, and small leather boots that probably cost more than Noah made in a week. He quickly began gathering the chess pieces, his movements awkward with embarrassment. "Oh, miss, you shouldn't be up here. This is the employee break room." His voice was gentle but firm, the tone he used with his own son when explaining boundaries. The girl stepped closer, completely unintimidated by his attempt to establish authority. "I'm Sophie," she announced with the confidence that only comes from a lifetime of having doors open for you. "My mom owns this building." She gestured vaguely upward, as if ownership of a 60-story skyscraper was no more significant than owning a bicycle. "Why are you playing alone?" Noah paused in his packing, studying her face. There was no condescension in her tone, no judgment, just genuine curiosity. "I'm Noah," he replied. setting down the black rook he'd been holding. And, well, chess. Helps me think, clears my head during lunch. Sophie's eyes immediately fixed on the chessboard with laser focus, her head tilting slightly as she examined the position of the remaining pieces. Noah watched her face transform as she took in the board, her expression shifting from casual interest to intense concentration. It was a look he recognized, the same expression his son got when working on a particularly challenging math problem. "You had your king in the center," she observed, pointing to where the white king sat on the e4 square. "That's dangerous, isn't it? All those open files." Noah blinked in surprise. Most adults couldn't even identify the pieces correctly, let alone comment on king safety in the endgame. You know chess?" Sophie shrugged, a gesture that managed to be both casual and proud. "A little bit. My tutor shows me things, but he's boring. He always explains why I should move here or there, but he never lets me figure it out myself." She moved closer to the table, her eyes never leaving the board. "And he lets me win all the time, which is stupid because how am I supposed to get better if I never lose?" There was something in her voice, a frustration that Noah recognized immediately. It was the same tone his son used when complaining about teachers who didn't challenge him, who assumed that being young meant being incapable of complex thought. Noah had spent enough time around bright students during his brief stint as a teaching assistant to recognize intellectual hunger when he saw it. "Well," Noah said slowly, settling back into his chair and making no further move to pack up the board, "chess is definitely a thinking person's game. Takes years to get good at it." He gestured to the setup before him. "This position here? I've been working on it for 20 minutes, and I'm still not sure what the best move is." Sophie's eyes lit up with the kind of excitement that most kids her age reserved for Christmas morning or ice cream trucks. "Can I see?" Noah glanced around the break room, suddenly aware of how this might look. The janitor and the boss's daughter huddled over a chessboard. The last thing he needed was to lose his job over a misunderstanding. But something about Sophie's genuine enthusiasm made him hesitate, I suppose. "For just a minute," he said finally. "But then you need to get back to wherever you're supposed to be." Sophie practically bounced into the chair across from him, her small hands hovering over the pieces. With reverent care. "My mom's in meetings all afternoon," she said dismissively. "She won't even notice I'm gone." There was something wistful in that statement, a loneliness that Noah recognized all too well. He thought of his own son, currently in after-school care, waiting for Noah to finish his shift and pick him up. At least his boy knew his father was coming, knew he was loved and prioritized despite their humble circumstances. "So," Sophie said, studying the board intently, "if this is white to move and you're trying to win." She traced potential paths with her finger, never quite touching the pieces. "The king wants to support the pawn push, but black's rook is controlling the back rank." Noah leaned forward, genuinely intrigued now. "Go on." "Well," Sophie continued, her brow furrowed in concentration, "what if white plays kf5? Then the king supports the g-pawn, and if black tries to attack from behind..." She was right. Noah had been so focused on complex tactical shots that he'd missed the simple, elegant solution staring him in the face. Sometimes the best move was the quiet one, the one that improved your position without fanfare or drama. That's actually brilliant," Noah said softly, moving the white king to f5. "I can't believe I missed that." Sophie beamed with the pure joy of intellectual discovery, the kind of smile that reminded Noah why he'd wanted to teach in the first place. In that moment, sitting in the sterile break room of a corporate tower, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and power, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the electric thrill of connecting with a genuinely gifted student. Neither of them noticed the security camera in the corner of the room, its red light blinking steadily as it recorded their interaction. 50 floors above them, in an office that commanded a view of half the city, someone was watching. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of chess analysis and animated discussion. Sophie proved to be not just knowledgeable about the game, but genuinely passionate about it in a way that reminded Noah of the chess club students he'd supervised during his teaching days. She asked thoughtful questions about pawn structure and piece coordination, her young mind absorbing concepts that many adult players struggled with. "My tutor always tells me to develop knights before bishops," Sophie said, repositioning the pieces to show a different opening setup. "But what if the bishops have better squares? What if the knights don't have anywhere good to go?" Noah smiled, impressed by her intuitive understanding of chess principles. "Your tutor's given you general rules, which are good for beginners, but chess is about recognizing when to break the rules. Every position is different. Exactly. Sophie's eyes sparkled with vindication. "That's what I keep trying to tell him, but he just says, 'Sophie, you need to learn the basics first.' It's so frustrating." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I bet it is," Noah said, understanding flooding his voice. He'd seen this before. Bright students trapped by well-meaning teachers who prioritized rule following over creative thinking. "You know what? Let me show you something." He reset the board to the starting position and began demonstrating a variation of the Sicilian defense, explaining how black could create dynamic counterplay by deliberately violating classical development principles. Sophie watched intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed a sophisticated grasp of chess strategy. "The key," Noah explained, moving a black pawn forward, "is understanding that principles are guidelines, not laws. When you know why the rules exist, you can decide when it makes sense to ignore them." Sophie nodded eagerly, then looked up at him with sudden determination. "I bet I could beat you." Noah chuckled, not condescendingly but with genuine warmth. There was something infectious about her confidence, her willingness to take on challenges that others might find intimidating. "I've been playing for 20 years, kiddo." "So?" Sophie's chin lifted with defiance. "That just means you're probably stuck in your ways. My chess app says that older players sometimes get too comfortable with their patterns." "Your chess app, huh?" Noah raised an eyebrow, amused by her casual reference to artificial intelligence as a source of strategic wisdom. "And what else does your chess app tell you?" "That the best way to improve is to play against stronger opponents," Sophie replied matter-of-factly. "And you're definitely stronger than my tutor, because you actually explain things in ways that make sense." Noah found himself genuinely considering her challenge. There was something refreshing about her directness, her complete lack of false modesty or social pretense. In his experience, children often approach chess with a fearlessness that adults had learned to suppress, and sometimes that boldness led to creative solutions that more experienced players might overlook. "Besides," Sophie added with a mischievous grin, "you should be able to beat a 9-year-old easily, right? Unless you're scared." The challenge was issued with such theatrical flair that Noah couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Oh, I see how it is. You're trash-talking me now." "I learned it from watching online tournaments," Sophie said proudly. "Psychological warfare is part of the game." "Psychological warfare," Noah repeated, shaking his head in amazement. "All right, Miss Sophie Lombardi, you want a game? Let's play a game. But I'm not going to go easy on you just because you're 9. "Good," Sophie said firmly, reaching across the table to shake his hand with surprising formality. "I hate it when people let me win. It's insulting." They reset the board, and Sophie confidently claimed the white pieces. "I always play white," she announced. "I like going first. I like starting things." As they began to play, Noah found himself genuinely impressed by Sophie's opening preparation. She played the Queen's Gambit with solid understanding, developing her pieces efficiently and controlling key central squares. Her moves showed clear purpose and planning, far beyond what he would have expected from someone her age. "You've studied this opening," Noah observed, responding with the Queen's Gambit declined. "I watch a lot of YouTube videos," Sophie admitted. "Castling kingside. There's this grandmaster from Russia who explains openings really well. He doesn't talk down to people just because they're learning." Noah nodded approvingly as he developed his pieces. Good teachers respect their students, regardless of age or experience level. The game continued, both players settling into a comfortable rhythm. Sophie played with the fearless aggression that Noah had expected, launching an early attack on his kingside that showed tactical awareness well beyond her years. But she also displayed a surprisingly mature understanding of positional concepts, trading pieces when it favored her pawn structure and maintaining pressure without overextending her position. "You're not just talented," Noah said as he defended against her aggressive bishop placement. "You actually understand what you're doing. That's rare." Sophie blushed at the compliment, but maintained her focus on the board. "My mom says I think too much about everything. She says I should spend more time on normal kid stuff." "What's normal kid stuff?" Noah asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Sophie shrugged, capturing one of his pawns with her knight. "I don't know. Shopping? Watching TV? Talking about celebrities?" She paused, considering her next move. "I tried joining the chess club at school, but the other kids said it was boring. They thought I was weird for liking it." Noah felt a pang of recognition. His own son had experienced similar social challenges, being intellectually advanced but struggling to connect with peers who didn't share his interests. "Being different isn't the same as being weird," he said gently. "Sometimes it just means you see things that other people miss." "That's what my mom says too," Sophie replied, moving her queen to a more active square. "But it still gets lonely sometimes." The honesty in her voice caught Noah off guard. Here was this privileged girl, living in luxury most people could only dream of, admitting to the same emotional struggles that plagued kids from all backgrounds. Intelligence, it seemed, was both a gift and a burden, regardless of economic circumstances. "I understand," Noah said quietly, and he meant it. "But you know what I've learned? The right people will appreciate what makes you special. You just have to be patient enough to find them." Sophie looked up from the board, studying his face with those perceptive brown eyes. "Is that why you play chess alone? Because you haven't found the right people yet?" The question hit Noah harder than he'd expected. He'd been telling himself that his solitary lunch games were about mental exercise and stress relief, but Sophie's innocent inquiry forced him to confront a deeper truth. He was lonely too, isolated by circumstances and loss in ways that a 9-year-old shouldn't be able to recognize but somehow did. "Maybe," he admitted, "or maybe I just found one of them." Sophie's face broke into a radiant smile, the kind of pure joy that reminded Noah why human connection mattered more than any career achievement or financial success. In that moment, sitting across from each other in the sterile corporate break room, they weren't Janitor and Billionaire's daughter. They were simply two chess players who had found a worthy opponent. "Your move," Sophie said, her eyes twinkling with mischief and genuine affection. Noah looked down at the board, then back at her eager face, and realized that this game had already become about much more than chess. 50 floors above the employee break room, Nora Ricci stood behind her executive desk, ostensibly reviewing quarterly projections on her laptop screen. But her attention kept drifting to the wall of monitors that displayed security feeds from throughout Meridian Financial Tower. As CEO and majority owner of one of the city's most successful investment firms, she maintained a careful awareness of everything that happened in her building. At 36, Nora commanded respect in boardrooms across the country. Her rise from struggling single mother to billionaire entrepreneur had been meteoric, built on a combination of brilliant financial instincts, relentless work ethic, and an almost supernatural ability to identify opportunities that others missed. The business press called her ruthless, But those who worked closely with her knew better. She was simply focused, driven by memories of poverty and vulnerability that still haunted her quiet moments. Today, however, her legendary focus was scattered. Sophie had been restless all morning, complaining about being stuck in the office while school was closed for teacher conferences. Nora had set her up in the adjacent conference room with tablets, books, and art supplies, but her daughter's energy was too dynamic to be contained by even the most luxurious babysitting arrangements. When Nora glanced at the conference room monitor and found it empty, her maternal instincts immediately kicked into high gear. Sophie was brilliant and curious, but she was also 9 years old and prone to exploration in environments that weren't designed for children. The building's security systems would prevent her from leaving the premises, but 60 floors of corporate offices provided plenty of opportunities for a precocious girl to find trouble. Nora quickly pulled up multiple camera feeds, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. She found Sophie on the 47th floor, in the employee break room, a space that her daughter technically had every right to access, but where she definitely didn't belong. But instead of immediately calling security or marching down to retrieve her wayward daughter, something made Nora pause. On the monitor, she could see Sophie sitting across from one of the building's maintenance staff, both of them focused intently on what appeared to be a chessboard. Nora recognized the man from personnel files she'd reviewed during quarterly evaluations. Noah Brown, 34 years old, single father, employed as a custodial technician for the past 2 years. His supervisor consistently rated him as reliable and thorough, the kind of employee who took pride in his work regardless of its perceived status. But seeing him now, watching how he interacted with Sophie, Nora noticed things that personnel files couldn't capture. His posture was patient and attentive, leaning forward slightly to hear what Sophie was saying. His hands moved deliberately as he adjusted chess pieces, explaining something with obvious enthusiasm. Most remarkably, he was treating Sophie not as a child to be humored, but as an intellectual equal worthy of serious consideration. Nora had witnessed countless interactions between adults and her daughter over the years. Business associates, teachers, even family friends. Most people approached Sophie with a combination of nervousness and condescension, simultaneously intimidated by her intelligence and determined to treat her as nothing more than a bright child. But this janitor, this man who cleaned offices and emptied trash cans, was engaging with Sophie as if her thoughts and opinions genuinely mattered. Something about his manner tugged at a memory buried deep in Nora's consciousness, the way he tilted his head when listening, the gentle patience in his gestures, the respectful attention he gave to Sophie's questions. It all felt hauntingly familiar, though she couldn't quite place why. On the monitor, she watched Sophie make what must have been an aggressive move, because Noah raised his eyebrows in apparent surprise and admiration. He leaned back in his chair, studying the board with genuine concentration, treating her 9-year-old daughter's chess strategy with the same seriousness he would afford a master-level opponent. Nora found herself genuinely intrigued. She'd hired several chess tutors for Sophie over the years, all of them highly credentialed and expensive. But none of them had managed to generate the kind of enthusiasm she was witnessing on the security feed. Sophie was practically vibrating with excitement, her whole body engaged in the conversation in a way that Nora rarely saw outside of their private moments together. As CEO, Nora had developed finely tuned instincts for reading people in situations. She could spot deception, manipulation, and hidden agendas from across a conference room. But watching Noah interact with Sophie, she saw none of the red flags that usually accompanied adult attention toward wealthy children. He wasn't trying to impress her or curry favor through her daughter. He seemed genuinely invested in the chess game itself, in the intellectual challenge and the pleasure of sharing knowledge with an eager student. The interaction reminded Nora of her own childhood, of the precious few adults who had recognized her potential when she was just another poor kid from a broken home. Teachers who stayed late to help with homework, coaches who saw leadership potential beneath teenage rebellion, mentors who believed in her dreams when everyone else saw only limitations. Those relationships had been transformative, providing the foundation of confidence and self-worth that had eventually enabled her extraordinary success. But those mentors had been rare, appearing in her life through chance encounters and lucky coincidences. The idea that Sophie might have stumbled across a similar figure in the most unlikely of circumstances, the building's custodial staff, struck Nora as both miraculous and deeply ironic. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from her assistant, but Nora ignored it, too fascinated by the scene unfolding on her security monitors. Sophie had just made another move, and Noah was shaking his head with what appeared to be genuine amazement. He said something that made Sophie laugh, not the polite giggle she usually offered to adults, but real, delighted laughter. When was the last time Nora had seen her daughter laugh like that? Sophie's life was carefully structured around educational opportunities and enriching experiences, but so much of it was solitary or conducted under adult supervision that prioritized achievement over joy. Nora provided the best of everything: tutors, lessons, travel, cultural experiences, but she couldn't manufacture the simple pleasure of finding someone who truly understood and appreciated Sophie's unique perspective. Yet here was this janitor, this man whose name she barely knew, offering her daughter something that all of Nora's resources hadn't been able to provide: genuine, intellectual companionship. The chess game continued, both players deeply absorbed in their strategic battle. Nora found herself trying to read the position from the security camera angle, wondering who was winning and what Sophie was learning from the experience. She made a mental note to research Noah Brown more thoroughly, not from suspicion, but from curiosity about the man who had managed to capture her daughter's attention so completely. As she watched, Sophie suddenly stood up and extended her hand across the table, apparently offering a formal handshake. Noah accepted it with obvious amusement, and they began resetting the board for another game. The sight of her daughter's excitement, her complete engagement with the moment, filled Nora with a complex mixture of emotions: gratitude, curiosity, and something that might have been maternal pride. For the first time in weeks, Sophie looked genuinely happy, and for reasons she couldn't yet fully understand. That happiness was tied to a man named Noah Brown, whose presence in their lives might be far more significant than either of them had realized. Nora settled back in her chair, quarterly projections forgotten, and continued watching the most important chess match of her daughter's young life. The chess game that followed exceeded every expectation Noah had harbored about Sophie's abilities. She played with a combination of tactical sharpness and strategic understanding that forced him to abandon any thoughts of casual play. This wasn't a gentle lesson disguised as a game. This was serious chess against a genuinely formidable opponent who happened to be 9 years old. Sophie opened with the English opening, a sophisticated choice that immediately signaled her advanced understanding of chess theory. "I like starting with the knight," she explained as she developed her pieces. "It keeps more options open than pushing pawns immediately." Noah responded with a solid setup, but found himself genuinely challenged by Sophie's unconventional approach to the middle game. She mixed classical development with modern tactical motifs, creating a position that was both sound and dynamically complex. When she sacrificed a pawn on move 12 to open lines against his king, Noah realized he was facing the most interesting chess opponent he'd encountered in years. "Where did you really learn to play like this?" he asked, carefully considering his response to her aggressive knight maneuver. Sophie's face lit up with pride at the implicit compliment. "Books, mostly. The library has this whole section on chess that nobody ever uses. And I watch videos online when I'm supposed to be doing other homework." She paused, a shadow crossing her expression. "My mom's always working, so I teach myself things." The casual mention of Nora's absence carried more weight than Sophie probably intended. Noah recognized the tone, the matter-of-fact acceptance of adult unavailability that children learn to mask their loneliness behind. His own son had perfected similar deflections, turning parental absence into personal independence rather than acknowledging the emotional cost. Self-teaching is impressive, Noah said, moving his bishop to block her attack. But it can be lonely, can't it? Sophie's eyes flicked up from the board, studying his face with surprising intensity. Sometimes. But books don't get impatient with questions, and YouTube videos don't mind if you replay the same lesson 50 times. Noah felt a pang of recognition. Here was a brilliant child, blessed with every material advantage, describing the same intellectual isolation that plagued gifted students from all backgrounds. Money could buy tutors and lessons, but it couldn't manufacture the genuine connection that made learning truly meaningful. "Well," Noah said, capturing one of her pawns, "you've definitely got natural talent. With the right practice and guidance, you could be really, really good at this." Sophie's face brightened with hope and excitement. "Would you teach me? Not like my boring tutor, but really teach me. Like advanced stuff?" The question caught Noah off guard. He glanced around the break room, suddenly hyper-aware of their circumstances. The billionaire's daughter asking the janitor to become her chess mentor. The request was touching in its sincerity, but also potentially complicated in ways that a 9-year-old couldn't fully appreciate. "Sophie," he said gently, "I'm just the janitor here. I'm sure your mom has access to much better teachers than me, professional coaches, grandmasters, people with actual credentials. But you don't let me win," Sophie said earnestly, leaning forward across the chessboard. "And you explain things so I understand them, not just so you can check off that you taught me something. My tutor always acts like he's doing me a favor by showing up, and then he spends half the lesson talking about how smart he is." Noah couldn't help but smile at her blunt assessment. "Sounds like you've had some frustrating experiences with teachers. The worst part is when they obviously don't think I can handle real chess," Sophie continued, her voice gaining intensity. "They show me these baby puzzles and act amazed when I solve them in 5 seconds. Or they explain basic tactics like I've never seen a chessboard before, even though I've told them I've read actual chess books." The frustration in her voice was so genuine, so heartfelt, that Noah felt his professional instincts kick in. During his brief career in education, he'd encountered many students like Sophie, intellectually advanced but emotionally neglected, hungry for teachers who would challenge rather than coddle them. "You know what I think?" Noah said, moving his rook to defend against her mounting pressure. "I think you don't just want to learn chess. You want to learn how to think about chess. How to see patterns and possibilities that other people miss." Sophie's eyes widened with excitement. "Exactly. That's exactly what I want. And I think," Noah continued, studying her eager expression, "that you're the kind of student who deserves teachers brave enough to push you beyond what feels comfortable or safe." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several other employees returning from their lunch break. They glanced curiously at the unusual sight of the maintenance worker and the well-dressed girl absorbed in their chess game. But politeness prevented them from staring or commenting directly. Sophie seemed oblivious to the attention, but Noah felt the weight of social expectations settling around them like fog. He was acutely aware of how this scene might be interpreted: the working-class employee and the boss's daughter, their heads bent together over a game that suggested a level of intimacy and engagement that crossed traditional boundaries. "Sophie," he said quietly, "I think maybe you should get back to wherever you're supposed to be. Your mom is probably looking for you." "She's in meetings until 4, Sophie replied dismissively. "She won't even notice I'm gone." The casual acceptance of parental inattention struck Noah as both heartbreaking and familiar. Sophie's loneliness wasn't dramatically different from what his own son experienced. The difference was that Sophie's Isolation came wrapped in luxury and privilege, making it somehow more invisible and therefore more persistent. He watched her contemplate her next move, her young face serious with concentration. There was something magnetic about her intelligence, her willingness to engage with complex ideas without the self-consciousness that often hampered adult learning. She reminded him of the brightest students from his teaching days, the ones who made education feel like discovery rather than obligation. "Tell you what," Noah said impulsively. "If you really want to improve your chess, I could recommend some books. Specific ones that would challenge you without being overwhelming." Sophie's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? You do?" "That? Sure," Noah said, surprised by his own commitment. "And if you ever want to discuss what you're learning, or if you have questions about specific positions." He gestured vaguely around the break room. "I'm here every day at lunch." "That would be amazing," Sophie said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "You have no idea how long I've wanted someone to talk to about chess who actually takes it." "Seriously?" Noah found himself genuinely moved by her enthusiasm. There was something pure about her intellectual hunger, unmarred by the cynicism or social calculation that often accompanied adult interactions. She simply wanted to learn to grow, to explore the infinite possibilities contained within 64 squares and 32 pieces. "Just remember," he said with mock seriousness, "if we're going to work together, I expect you to bring your A game. No more psychological warfare about being scared of 9-year-olds. Sophie giggled, the sound bright and genuine. "Deal, but I'm still going to try to beat you every single time." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Noah replied, meaning every word. As they reset the board for one final quick game before the lunch break ended. Neither of them noticed the security camera in the corner of the room, still faithfully recording their interaction for an audience of 150 floors above. Over the following 3 weeks, what began as a chance encounter evolved into something neither Noah nor Sophie had expected. A genuine mentorship that transcended the artificial boundaries of their respective social positions. Sophie developed an uncanny ability to accidentally find herself in the employee break room during Noah's lunch hour, always armed with new questions about chess strategy or tactical puzzles she discovered in her independent research. Noah, for his part, found himself looking forward to these daily encounters with an anticipation that surprised him. Teaching Sophie was like working with the most dedicated and enthusiastic student he'd ever encountered. She absorbed chess concepts with remarkable speed, but more importantly, she brought fresh perspectives to positions that Noah had been analyzing for years. "I've been thinking about that endgame you showed me yesterday," Sophie announced one Tuesday afternoon, settling into what had become her regular chair across from Noah's small table. "The one with the king and pawn versus king." Noah smiled, pulling out the battered chess set that had become central to their daily routine. "The opposition exercise? What about it?" "Well," Sophie said, carefully arranging pieces on the board, "you explained how the attacking king needs to gain the opposition to push the pawn through. But what if we think about it differently? What if instead of trying to gain the opposition, the defending king tries to lose it at the right moment?" She demonstrated her concept, moving the defending king to deliberately cede the opposition, while simultaneously limiting the attacking king's options. It was a subtle insight that revealed deep understanding of the dynamic tension in seemingly simple endgames. Noah studied the position, impressed once again by Sophie's ability to see familiar concepts from unexpected angles. "That's actually brilliant. You're thinking about tempo and triangulation without even knowing the formal terminology." "What's triangulation?" Sophie asked eagerly, leaning forward with the intellectual hunger that Noah had come to recognize as her defining characteristic. For the next 20 minutes, Noah walked her through the concept of triangulation in chess endgames, showing how kings could maneuver to gain tempo advantages in critical moments. Sophie absorbed the lesson with characteristic intensity, asking probing questions that forced Noah to examine his own understanding more deeply. "It's like a dance," she said finally, moving the kings through the triangulation pattern. Each player is trying to force the other person to move first, to commit to a position that creates weaknesses. "Exactly," Noah said, genuinely amazed by her ability to grasp abstract concepts through metaphor. "And that's not just true in chess endgames. It's true in life too, knowing when to act and when to wait, when to commit and when to keep your options open." Sophie nodded thoughtfully, then looked up at him with curious eyes. "Is that why you work here? Because you're waiting for the right moment to make your move?" The question caught Noah completely off guard. In 3 weeks of chess lessons, Sophie had demonstrated remarkable intuition about strategic concepts, but this was the first time she'd applied that analytical thinking to his personal circumstances. Noah paused, uncertain how to respond to such direct insight from a 9-year-old. "I work here because I need to support my family. Sometimes we don't get to choose our circumstances. We just try to make the best moves available to us." "But you're really smart," Sophie said with characteristic bluntness. "You understand chess better than any of my expensive tutors, and you explain things better than most of my teachers. Shouldn't you be doing something that uses your brain more?" Noah felt a familiar ache in his chest, the recognition of dreams deferred and potential unexplored. "Life is complicated, Sophie. Being smart doesn't always translate into opportunities. Sometimes we have responsibilities that matter more than personal ambitions." Sophie studied his face with those perceptive brown eyes, and Noah had the uncomfortable feeling that she understood more about his situation than a child should. "My mom says that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is bet on yourself, even when other people don't see your potential." The wisdom of her words, delivered with such innocent confidence, left Noah momentarily speechless. Here was this privileged girl, offering life advice drawn from her billionaire mother's philosophy, yet somehow making it feel personal and relevant to his working-class struggles. "Your mom sounds like a smart woman," Noah said finally. "She is," Sophie replied with obvious pride. "She started with nothing and built everything we have now. She says the hardest part wasn't learning how to make money. It was learning to believe she deserved success." Noah nodded, understanding the psychological barriers that accompanied economic hardship more intimately than Sophie could possibly realize. Self-doubt can be more limiting than any external obstacle. "Is that why you play chess alone?" Sophie asked with startling directness. "Because you doubt yourself?" The question hit Noah like a physical blow. In their weeks of chess analysis and strategic discussion, Sophie had somehow identified the emotional core of his isolation, the fear that his intellectual gifts weren't sufficient to overcome his circumstances, that dreaming beyond his current situation was a luxury he couldn't afford. Before he could formulate a response, Sophie reached into her expensive leather backpack and pulled out a chess book Noah had never seen before. The cover showed it was an advanced text on grandmaster games, far beyond what most adult players would attempt to study. "I bought this at the bookstore yesterday," she said, sliding it across the table. "I thought maybe we could analyze some of the games together. If you want to, I mean." Noah picked up the book, noting its pristine condition and expensive binding. The games inside were annotated by world-class players, offering insights into chess strategy at the highest levels of competition. It was exactly the kind of resource he would have treasured during his college years, when he'd dreamed of becoming a serious competitive player. "Sophie," he said softly, "this must have cost." "It doesn't matter what it cost," she interrupted with surprising firmness. "What matters is that we can learn from it together. You've been teaching me so much, and I want to give you something back." The generosity of her gesture, both financial and emotional, left Noah deeply moved. But more than that, he recognized in Sophie's gift a kind of faith in their partnership that he hadn't experienced since his wife's death. Someone believed in his potential enough to invest in it, to see their chess sessions as valuable enough to merit serious resources. "Thank you," he said, meaning it more deeply than she could possibly understand. This is really special." "So, are you," Sophie replied with devastating simplicity. "You just need to start believing it." As they opened the book to examine their first Grandmaster game together, neither of them noticed the security camera that had been faithfully recording their growing friendship. 50 floors above them, Nora Ritchie sat in her executive office, watching their interaction with an expression that combined maternal pride, professional curiosity, and something that looked suspiciously like recognition. The chess lessons were becoming something more than either Noah or Sophie had anticipated. And somewhere in the heart of Meridian Financial Tower, 3 lives were converging toward a revelation that would change everything they thought they knew about family, opportunity, and the power of unexpected connections. But for now, there was only the board, the pieces, and 2 minds united in their love of the beautiful, infinite game that had brought them together. After 3 weeks of covert surveillance through security cameras, Nora Ritchie had reached the limits of her patience. Every day, she watched her daughter's lunch-hour chess sessions with growing fascination and mounting questions. Sophie would return from these encounters glowing with intellectual satisfaction, chattering about chess strategies and tactical concepts with an enthusiasm that no expensive tutor had ever managed to generate. But it was more than Sophie's obvious happiness that intrigued Nora. There was something about Noah Brown himself, the way he carried himself, the gentle patience in his teaching style, the respectful attention he gave to Sophie's questions, that tugged at memories she couldn't quite bring into focus. The feeling was like trying to remember a song from childhood, recognizing the melody but unable to place the lyrics. On a Thursday afternoon in late October, Nora made a decision that would have surprised anyone who knew her reputation for calculated business moves. Instead of sending her assistant to retrieve Sophie from wherever she'd wandered, Nora decided to conduct the search personally. She took the executive elevator down to the 47th floor, her heels clicking against the polished marble as she walked purposefully toward the employee break room. Through the glass walls, she could see Sophie and Noah engaged in what appeared to be an intense chess analysis, their heads bent close together over the familiar battered board. Nora paused at the entrance, observing them for a moment before announcing her presence. Noah was demonstrating something with the pieces, moving a knight through a complex tactical sequence, while Sophie watched with rapt attention. His hands moved with surprising grace for someone whose daily work involved mops and maintenance tools, and his explanation was clearly engaging enough to hold the interest of her intellectually demanding daughter. "Sophie," Nora said, stepping into the break room with the kind of authoritative presence that commanded boardrooms. "There you are. I was looking for you." Both Sophie and Noah immediately stood, but their reactions couldn't have been more different. Sophie's face lit up with excitement at the opportunity to show off her chess progress, while Noah's expression shifted to one of respectful concern, clearly worried about potential consequences of their daily meetings. "Mom!" Sophie exclaimed, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "This is Noah. He's the one I've been telling you about. He's teaching me real chess, not the boring stuff my tutor shows me." Noah stepped forward, his posture straightening into something approaching military attention. "Ma'am," he said formally, "I hope it's all right that Sophie and I have been playing chess during my lunch breaks. I know she's not supposed to be in the employee areas, but she's such an eager student, and I didn't want to discourage her interest in the game." Nora studied his face carefully, taking in details that security cameras couldn't capture. He was younger than she'd expected, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair showing premature gray at the temples and kind eyes that spoke of someone who'd experienced both joy and significant loss. There was something fundamentally decent about his demeanor, no false servility or obvious attempts to curry favor through her daughter. Please, Nora said, gesturing for them to sit back down. Don't let me interrupt your game. Sophie immediately launched into an animated explanation of the chess position they'd been analyzing, her words tumbling over each other in her excitement to share her new knowledge. We were looking at this really cool tactical pattern called a discovered attack, where you move one piece and it uncovers an attack from another piece behind it. Noah says it's like revealing a hidden weapon at exactly the right moment. Nora listened to her daughter's explanation while continuing to observe Noah's reactions. He watched Sophie with genuine pride and affection, occasionally adding clarifying details or asking questions that guided her toward deeper understanding. It was clear that he took real pleasure in her intellectual growth, treating her achievements as meaningful accomplishments rather than cute performances. Sophie's developed quite rapidly, Noah said, addressing Nora directly. She has exceptional pattern recognition and tactical vision. With proper training, she could become a very strong player. And how do you know so much about chess instruction? Nora asked, her tone curious rather than challenging. Noah hesitated for a moment, as if deciding how much personal information to share. I used to work in education, he said finally. Before my circumstances changed. I've always believed that teaching is about recognizing potential and providing the right challenges to help it develop. Something in his phrasing, the careful way he referenced his past, the slight pause before mentioning changed circumstances, resonated with Nora's own experiences of life taking unexpected turns. She found herself genuinely curious about his story, about the path that had led from education to custodial work. What did you teach? She asked. I was a teaching assistant, Noah replied. Elementary level, mostly working with students who needed extra support or challenge. I loved the work, but... He glanced at Sophie, clearly uncomfortable discussing personal struggles in front of a child. Sometimes life requires different priorities. Nora nodded, understanding the unspoken implications. Single parenthood, financial pressures, the necessity of stable employment over professional fulfillment. These were challenges she remembered intimately from her own journey. As she watched Noah interact with Sophie, demonstrating a chess concept with patient enthusiasm, Nora felt that nagging sense of familiarity intensify into something approaching recognition. His teaching style, the way he tilted his head when listening to student questions, the gentle encouragement he offered when Sophie made mistakes, it all felt hauntingly familiar. You mentioned working with elementary students, Nora said. Carefully, what school district? Morrison Elementary in the Riverside District, Noah replied. I worked there for about 4 years, until 2019. The name hit Nora like a physical blow. Morrison Elementary, the struggling public school where she'd enrolled Sophie during her own years of financial hardship, when private preschools were impossibly expensive, and she was juggling 3 part-time jobs while completing her business degree. The school where dedicated teachers and staff members had provided Sophie with stability and care during some of the most challenging years of their lives. Nora's mind raced through memories she'd buried beneath years of success and financial security. The patient teaching assistant who always stayed late to help struggling students, who somehow always had extra snacks for children whose parents forgot to pack lunch, who treated every student with the same respect and attention regardless of their family's economic circumstances. Ms. Henderson's pre-K class, Nora said slowly, the words emerging almost involuntarily. Noah's eyes widened with sudden recognition, his professional composure giving way to genuine shock. Sophie Ritchie, he said softly. But your name? You were Nora. Martinez, Nora finished, her voice barely above a whisper. My maiden name. I took it back after my divorce. The silence that followed was filled with the weight of recovered memory and the stunning coincidence of their reunion. Sophie looked back and forth between them, sensing the emotional undercurrents, but not understanding their source. "You know each other?" Sophie asked, her voice filled with curious excitement. Noah's eyes remained fixed on Nora's face, as if seeing her clearly. "For the first time." "Your mother was one of the hardest working people I ever met," he said gently. "She was putting herself through school while raising you, working multiple jobs, never missing a parent conference or school event, despite everything she had on her plate." Nora felt tears threatening, memories of those exhausting but hopeful years flooding back with unexpected intensity. She remembered Noah as the kind face who greeted Sophie every morning, who made sure she felt valued and supported, even when Nora's resources were stretched to the breaking point. "I can't believe it's you," Nora said, her voice thick with emotion. "After all these years, in my own building." Sophie's excitement was palpable as she began to grasp the significance of their connection. "You taught me when I was little? That's so cool. No wonder you're such a good teacher. You already knew how to explain things to me." Noah smiled at Sophie's enthusiasm, but his eyes remained focused on Nora. "I remember thinking you were going to accomplish amazing things," he said. "You had this determination, this absolute refusal to let circumstances define your future. It looks like I was right." The compliment, delivered with such sincere admiration, left Nora temporarily speechless. In boardrooms across the country, she was accustomed to flattery and strategic praise, but Noah's words carried the weight of witnessed struggle and genuine respect for her journey. "You helped us more than you probably realized," Nora said softly, her professional composure cracking to reveal the gratitude she'd carried for years. "You made Sophie feel special when we couldn't afford the extras that other families took for granted. You made me feel like I wasn't failing as a mother, even when everything else was falling apart." As the three of them sat in the employee break room, surrounded by the symbols of Nora's extraordinary success, the chessboard between them seemed to represent something more than a game. It was a bridge across time and circumstance, connecting past struggles to present triumphs, and revealing the circular nature of kindness and mentorship. The reunion they never expected was about to become something none of them could have imagined. That evening, long after the building had emptied of its usual corporate bustle, Nora sat alone in her executive office, staring at a personnel file that had taken on entirely new significance. Noah Brown's employment record lay open on her desk, but the dry facts and dates couldn't capture the flood of memories that his identity had unleashed. She remembered everything now, details that had been buried beneath years of success and the deliberate amnesia that sometimes accompanies rapid social mobility. The morning routines at Morrison Elementary, when she would drop off 4-year-old Sophie with barely enough time to catch the bus to her first job. The gentle teaching assistant who always seemed to anticipate her daughter's needs, who never made Nora feel judged for her second-hand clothes or erratic schedule. But it was one specific memory that had been haunting her since their reunion in the break room. A moment of crisis that had nearly derailed everything she'd worked to build. December 2018. Sophie was in pre-K, and Nora was in her final semester of business school, balancing a crushing course load with 3 part-time jobs. The holiday season had brought additional financial pressures, and despite her careful budgeting, Nora found herself facing an impossible choice between paying for Sophie's school lunch account and buying textbooks for her final exams. She'd tried to handle it quietly, packing whatever food she could afford and hoping Sophie wouldn't mention being hungry at school. But children were perceptive, and Sophie had begun asking questions about why her lunch was always peanut butter sandwiches, while other kids had hot meals and variety. Nora's pride had warred with her desperation. She'd grown up in poverty herself, and knew intimately the shame that accompanied visible need. The last thing she wanted was for Sophie to experience that same stigma, but her options were genuinely limited. Then came the envelope. She'd found it in Sophie's backpack on a Friday afternoon, a sealed envelope with her name written in careful handwriting. Inside were gift cards totaling $200 for groceries and a simple note. These are extras from our school emergency fund. Please don't hesitate to use resources that are available for families. Sophie is lucky to have such a dedicated mother. The gift cards have been a lifeline, providing not just immediate relief but the psychological space to focus on final exams without the constant anxiety about basic needs. Nora had never discovered who had left the envelope, though she'd always suspected it came from someone on the school staff who had recognized their situation. Now, sitting in her corner office that commanded a view of half the city, Nora realized she was looking at the man who had quietly saved her family during their darkest moment. She reached for her phone and dialed Noah's number from his personnel file. He answered on the second ring, his voice cautious and formal. "Mr. Brown, this is Nora Ricci. I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all, Ms. Ricci. Is everything all right? Is Sophie okay?" Even now, his first concern was for her daughter's well-being. "Sophie's fine. She's upstairs doing homework and probably replaying every chess move from your session today. I was calling because I wanted to talk to you about something." Something from Morrison Elementary. There was a pause on the other end of the line. And when Noah spoke again, his voice was softer. "I wondered if you might remember more details once you had time to think about it." "The envelope," Nora said simply. December 2018, $200 in grocery gift cards, with a note about emergency funds. Another pause, longer this time. "You were working so hard," Noah said finally. "Sophie mentioned being hungry sometimes, and I could see how much pressure you were under." The note about emergency funds. "I thought it might be easier to accept help if you believed it came from an official program." Nora felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of gratitude mixed with a profound sense of completion. "Noah, you have no idea what that meant to us. I was ready to drop out of school. I couldn't afford textbooks, and Sophie needed proper nutrition, and I felt like I was failing at everything." "You weren't failing," Noah said firmly. "You were one of the strongest people I'd ever met. You just needed a little support to get through a rough patch." "But it wasn't an emergency fund, was it?" Nora asked, though she already knew the answer. "No," Noah admitted quietly. "It was money I'd been saving for Christmas presents." "But seeing you struggle like that, knowing I could help, it was the best use I could imagine for those funds." The magnitude of his sacrifice hit Nora like a physical blow. Here was a man working as a teaching assistant, hardly a lucrative position, who had given up his own Christmas to ensure that a student's family could survive a difficult period. The generosity was staggering, but even more remarkable was the way he'd preserved her dignity by making the gift seem institutional rather than personal. "You gave up your Christmas for us," Nora said, her voice breaking slightly. "I gave up some presents," Noah corrected gently. "But I got something better, the knowledge that Sophie would have proper meals and that you could focus on your studies. Watching you graduate that spring, seeing how proud Sophie was, that was worth more than any gift I could have bought myself." Nora closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the circular nature of their story. The man who had quietly supported her rise from poverty was now working in the building that her success had made possible, teaching chess to the daughter whose early education he had helped secure. "And now you're here," she said wonderfully. "In my building, teaching Sophie again. It's like the universe has a sense of humor about second chances," Noah finished. They talked for another hour, filling in the gaps between past and present. Noah told her about losing his wife to cancer, about the financial devastation that had forced him to leave education for more stable employment. Nora shared the details of her business journey, the risks and breakthroughs that had led to her current success. What emerged from their conversation was a picture of two people who had both experienced profound loss and transformation, whose paths had intersected at a crucial moment and were now converging again under circumstances neither could have predicted. "Noah," Nora said as their conversation began to wind down, "I want you to know that everything I've accomplished, everything Sophie and I have built. It started with your kindness. You didn't just give us money, you gave us hope when we desperately needed it. And you gave me something too, Noah replied. Watching you succeed, seeing Sophie grow into such a remarkable young woman, it reminded me that helping others isn't just about the immediate impact. Sometimes the best investments take years to mature. As Nora hung up the phone, she realized that their reunion represented more than coincidence or closure. It was an opportunity, not just to repay an old debt, but to create something new from the foundation of trust and mutual respect they had established years ago. The chess games in the break room had been just the beginning. Now, with the full context of their shared history, Nora began to envision possibilities that could honor their past, while building toward a future none of them had dared to imagine. In the elegant silence of her executive office, surrounded by the symbols of her extraordinary achievement, Nora Ricci began planning the most important business proposition of her career, one that would finally allow her to repay the man who had made it all possible. The next morning, Nora arrived at the office earlier than usual, her mind buzzing with plans and possibilities that had kept her awake most of the night. She had instructed her assistant to clear her entire lunch hour and to ensure that Noah Brown would be available for a private meeting in her office at precisely noon. When the appointment time arrived, Nora felt an unfamiliar nervousness that reminded her of job interviews from her struggling years. This conversation would require a delicate balance of professional authority and personal vulnerability, and the stakes felt impossibly high. Noah arrived punctually, dressed in his custodial uniform but carrying himself with the quiet dignity that Nora remembered from their teaching days. Her assistant showed him into the expansive corner office, and Nora watched his eyes widen slightly as he took in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the original artwork, and the commanding view of the city skyline. "Please sit," Nora said, gesturing to one of the comfortable leather chairs arranged around a small conference table. She had deliberately chosen this informal seating area, rather than positioning herself behind her imposing executive desk. This conversation needed to happen between equals, not employer and employee. Noah settled into the chair with visible uncertainty, clearly uncomfortable with the role reversal that placed him in the billionaire's office rather than cleaning it. "Ms. Ricci, I hope I'm not in trouble for the chess sessions with Sophie. I know it's probably against policy for employees to." "Noah," Nora interrupted gently, "you're not in trouble. Quite the opposite, actually." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I asked you here because I wanted to talk about our history. About what you did for Sophie and me all those years ago. I told you last night, it was nothing extraordinary," Noah began, but Nora held up a hand to stop him. "It was everything," she said firmly. "And I need you to understand that before we can move forward." For the next 20 minutes, Nora shared details about their life that Noah hadn't known, how close she'd come to dropping out of school, how the stress of poverty had nearly broken her resolve, how his anonymous gift had provided not just financial relief but the psychological space to believe in her own potential. "That envelope arrived on the same day I'd made an appointment to withdraw from my final semester," Nora revealed. "I had convinced myself that I was being selfish, that Sophie needed stability more than I needed a degree. Your gift cards bought groceries, but more importantly, they bought me time to realize that finishing school was the best thing I could do for both of us." Noah listened intently, his expression growing more serious as he began to grasp the full impact of his long-ago decision. "I had no idea things were that dire," he said softly. "Sophie always seemed so happy at school." "Because you made her feel safe and valued," Nora replied. "You gave her what I couldn't afford to provide, the sense that she mattered, that someone was paying attention to her needs beyond basic survival." She stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the city that had become the stage for her remarkable success. "Do you know what I thought about during my first board meeting in this building? When I was negotiating the purchase that would make me the majority owner, Noah shook his head. I thought about you, Nora said, turning back to face him. I thought about a teaching assistant who saw potential in a struggling single mother and quietly provided the support that made everything else possible. I thought about dignity and kindness and the way small acts of generosity can compound into extraordinary outcomes. Nora, Noah said, his voice thick with emotion, you don't owe me anything. Your success is the result of your own hard work and intelligence. You were the catalyst, Nora interrupted. The person who provided support at exactly the moment when giving up felt like the only rational choice. She returned to her chair, leaning forward to make sure he understood the full weight of her words. Everything I've built, everything Sophie and I have accomplished, it started with your kindness. The silence that followed was heavy with mutual recognition and respect. Finally, Noah spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I lost my wife 3 years ago, he said. Cancer, the medical bills, the time away from work, the emotional devastation. Everything I'd built just collapsed. I went from being a teacher who believed in making a difference to being a janitor who felt grateful just to have steady employment. Nora felt her heart constrict with empathy for his loss and the familiar struggle of economic displacement. Some days, cleaning these offices, I wondered if I'd wasted my life, Noah continued. If all those years in education had been naive. Idealism, if I should have chosen a more practical career from the beginning. And now? Nora asked gently. Noah looked around the opulent office, then back at her face. Now I'm sitting in a billionaire's office, being thanked for a kindness I'd almost forgotten, discovering that the student I helped support became one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the city. He smiled, and for the first time since entering the office, he seemed truly relaxed. I think maybe those education years weren't wasted after all. Nora reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Noah, I have a proposition for you. Not charity, not a handout, but a genuine business opportunity based on merit and potential. Noah's expression grew attentive but wary. I've been planning to establish a youth development foundation, Nora continued. Programs for underprivileged students, mentorship opportunities, educational resources for families who can't access traditional advantages. I need someone to run it, someone who understands both the challenges these families face and the educational strategies that can make a real difference. She watched Noah's face carefully as the implications of her offer began to sink in. The position would come with a competitive salary, full benefits, and the resources to create programs that could impact thousands of students, Nora explained. You'd have the authority to hire staff, design curricula, and implement your vision of what educational support should look like. Noah sat in stunned silence for several moments. Nora, I don't know what to say. The opportunity sounds incredible, but I have to ask, is this offer based on my qualifications or on your gratitude for something that happened 8 years ago? Nora smiled, impressed by his directness and integrity. It's based on both. Your qualifications are evident. You have educational experience. You understand the challenges facing struggling families, and you've demonstrated remarkable skill at recognizing and developing potential. Sophie's chess progress in just 3 weeks is proof of your teaching abilities. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. But you're right that my gratitude plays a role too. Not because I want to repay a debt, but because I've learned that the best business decisions often align personal values with professional opportunities. I need someone I can trust completely to represent the Foundation's mission. Someone who has proven that they put student welfare above personal gain. Noah's eyes glistened with emotion as he processed the magnitude of what she was offering. This would mean I could return to education, to working with students who need extra support. It would mean you could design and implement exactly the kind of programs you believe in most, Nora confirmed, with the resources to make them truly effective. And Sophie? Noah asked, what about our chess sessions? Nora laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Sophie would probably fire me as her mother if I interfered with those. Consider continued chess instruction part of your job description. Noah stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the city with new eyes. When he turned back to face Nora, his expression was one of wonder and determination. 8 years ago, you were a struggling student who needed someone to believe in your potential, he said slowly. Today, you're offering me the chance to rediscover my own purpose. It feels like the universe has a sense of humor about second chances, Nora finished. Echoing his words from their phone conversation, Noah extended his hand across the table. In that case, Ms. Ricci, I accept your offer. When do I start? As they shook hands, sealing an agreement that represented both professional opportunity and personal redemption, Nora realized that their story had come full circle in the most beautiful way possible. The teacher had become the student, the helper had become the helped, and two families were about to discover that the best investments in human potential often take years to mature, but yield dividends that last generations. Outside the office windows, the city sparkled with possibility, and somewhere in the building below, Sophie was probably wondering why her chess lessons had led to such an important business meeting. The answer, they both knew, was that the most meaningful games are never really about the moves on the board. They're about the connections we make and the potential we help each other discover. 3 weeks after Noah officially accepted his position as Director of Youth Development for the Meridian Foundation, an opportunity arose that would test everything they had built together. The notification arrived via email on a crisp November morning. The Regional Youth Chess Championship was accepting late entries for their annual tournament, and the deadline for registration was that Friday. Nora found herself staring at the announcement on her computer screen, her mind immediately jumping to Sophie's remarkable progress under Noah's guidance. In just 2 months of daily chess sessions, her daughter had transformed from an enthusiastic amateur into a player of genuine skill and sophistication. But a regional championship would pit Sophie against the most talented young players from across 3 states, competitors who had been training intensively for years with professional coaches and comprehensive support systems. The decision to enter Sophie in the tournament wasn't made lightly. That evening, the 3 of them gathered in Nora's penthouse apartment for what had become their weekly dinner and chess analysis session. The apartment's spacious living room had been transformed into an informal chess classroom with multiple boards set up for simultaneous analysis and walls lined with chess books that Noah had recommended for Sophie's expanding library. I received an interesting email today, Nora began, setting down her tablet where the tournament announcement was still displayed. The Regional Youth Chess Championship is next month. Ages 8 to 16, with significant scholarship prizes for the top finishers. Sophie's eyes immediately lit up with excitement and trepidation. A real tournament? With actual strong players? Noah looked up from the endgame position he'd been analyzing, his expression thoughtful and cautious. Regional championships are serious competitions, Sophie. The kids who enter have usually been training for years with professional coaches. The time controls are longer, the pressure is intense, and the level of play is significantly higher than anything you've experienced. But I've gotten so much better, Sophie protested, her competitive spirit immediately aroused by the challenge. You said yourself that my tactical vision has improved dramatically, and I've been studying those Grandmaster games religiously. You have improved, Noah agreed, his voice filled with genuine pride. Your progress has been remarkable. But tournament chess is different from our friendly games. There are hundreds of people watching. Time pressure creates stress, and one mistake can end your chances immediately. Nora watched the interaction between Sophie and Noah with fascination. Over the past few weeks, she'd observed their relationship evolving from teacher-student to something approaching mentor-protege. with Noah displaying the kind of protective concern that suggested deep emotional investment in Sophie's development. "What do you think, honestly?" Nora asked Noah directly. "Is she ready for this level of competition?" Noah was quiet for several moments, studying Sophie's eager face and considering his response carefully. "Objectively? No. She's been playing seriously for only 2 months. Most of her competitors will have been training since they were 5 or 6 years old." Sophie's face fell slightly, but Noah held up a hand before she could protest. "However," he continued, "chess isn't just about technical preparation. It's about pattern recognition, strategic thinking, and the ability to perform under pressure. Sophie has natural gifts that can't be taught, and she's developed remarkable analytical skills in a very short time." He paused, looking directly at Sophie with the kind of serious attention he reserved for their most important chess discussions. "More importantly, you have something that many young tournament players lack. You play for the pure love of the game. You're not burdened by expectations or afraid of disappointing coaches or parents. That fearlessness could be a significant advantage." Sophie's expression brightened again. "So you think I should enter?" "I think," Noah said carefully, "that if you want to enter, we should prepare you as thoroughly as possible and see what happens. But you need to understand that success won't be measured by your final ranking. It will be measured by how well you handle the pressure, how much you learn from each game, and whether you can maintain your love for chess, regardless of the results." Nora felt a surge of admiration for Noah's approach. He was managing to be both realistic about the challenges and supportive of Sophie's ambitions, framing the experience in terms of personal growth rather than competitive achievement. "I want to do it," Sophie said firmly. "Even if I lose every game, I want to see how I measure up against really strong players. And besides," she added with a grin, "you'll be there to help me analyze my games afterward." The registration deadline was Friday, giving them exactly 3 weeks to prepare. Noah immediately threw himself into creating an intensive training program that would address Sophie's most critical weaknesses while building on her natural strengths. The daily lunch sessions expanded into evening coaching sessions, with Nora often joining them to observe and occasionally participate in strategic discussions. Noah's approach to tournament preparation was methodical and comprehensive. He identified the opening systems that Sophie played most confidently and helped her develop deeper understanding of the resulting middle game positions. They worked extensively on endgame technique, knowing that many youth games were decided in simplified positions where technical accuracy was crucial. Most importantly, Noah taught Sophie how to manage her time during games, a skill that could only be developed through practice with tournament-style time controls. "The biggest difference between our casual games and tournament play," Noah explained, during one of their preparation sessions, "is psychological pressure. In a tournament, every move matters. Every decision could be the difference between winning and losing. Learning to stay calm and think clearly under that kind of stress is often more important than memorizing opening variations." To simulate tournament conditions, Noah arranged for Sophie to play practice games against several adult members of the local chess club. Nora was initially concerned about her daughter facing adult opponents, but Noah explained that playing against stronger players was the fastest way to improve. "Sophie needs to experience what it feels like to be outplayed," he said. "She needs to learn how to defend difficult positions and how to recognize when her opponent has made subtle mistakes. Playing against adults will teach her resilience and help her develop fighting spirit." The practice sessions were revelatory. Sophie lost most of the games against experienced adult players, but her performance improved dramatically with each encounter. She learned to remain composed when facing aggressive attacks, to look for counterplay when her position seemed hopeless, and to capitalize on her opponent's overconfidence. More importantly, she began to develop the kind of chess intuition that separated strong players from merely competent ones. Noah watched with growing pride as Sophie started to recognize complex tactical patterns instantly, as her positional understanding deepened, and as she began to display the kind of fighting spirit that characterized true competitors. "She's ready," Noah announced after Sophie's final practice game. A hard-fought draw against a player rated nearly 2,000. "She's not going to win the tournament, but she's going to surprise people. And more importantly, she's going to represent herself and everything we've worked on with dignity and skill." The tournament was held at the Grand Riverside Convention Center, a massive facility that could accommodate the 400 participants and their families. Nora, Noah, and Sophie arrived early on Saturday morning to register and survey the competition. The sight that greeted them was both inspiring and intimidating. Hundreds of young chess players filled the main tournament hall, their ages ranging from elementary school through high school. Many were accompanied by professional coaches carrying thick binders of prepared analysis. Parents clustered around demonstration boards, discussing strategy and sharing tournament experiences. The atmosphere buzzed with nervous energy and competitive intensity. Sophie took in the scene with wide eyes, her excitement tempered by the obvious realization that this was far beyond anything she had previously experienced. "There are so many players," she whispered to Noah, "and they all look so serious and professional." "Remember what we talked about," Noah replied gently. "You're not here to prove anything to anyone else. You're here to test yourself, to learn, and to enjoy playing chess against the strongest opponents you've ever faced." Nora felt her own nervousness building as they completed the registration process and found Sophie's assigned board for the first round. As CEO of a major corporation, she was accustomed to high-pressure situations, but watching her daughter prepare for intellectual combat against seasoned competitors triggered protective instincts that no boardroom negotiation had ever awakened. The tournament format called for 6 rounds over 2 days, with time controls of 90 minutes plus a 30-second increment per move. Sophie would face opponents from across the region, many of whom had been training intensively for years and carried impressive ratings from previous competitions. Sophie's first-round opponent was Marcus Chen, a 12-year-old from Chicago who had won multiple state youth championships and carried a rating nearly 800 points, higher than Sophie's provisional ranking. He arrived at the board with a professional chess set, a notation pad, and the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to tournament success. "Good luck," Marcus said politely as they shook hands before the game began. "Thank you," Sophie replied, her voice steady despite the obvious disparity in experience and preparation. As the tournament director called for play to begin, Sophie settled into her chair and began the game with her characteristic opening move. 1e4. Noah and Nora took seats in the spectator area, close enough to observe the game, but far enough away to avoid creating additional pressure. The first game was a learning experience in the most literal sense. Marcus played with the kind of technical precision that only came from years of professional coaching, systematically outplaying Sophie in the opening and middle game while maintaining perfect time management. Sophie fought valiantly, displaying the tactical alertness and fighting spirit that Noah had cultivated, but the experience gap proved decisive. She lost after 45 moves, but the game was competitive enough to earn respectful comments from other spectators. "That was a really good game," Marcus said afterward, clearly impressed by Sophie's resistance. "You defended much better than I expected. How long have you been playing competitively?" "This is my first tournament," Sophie admitted. Marcus's eyes widened in surprise. "Seriously? I've been playing tournaments for 6 years, and you held your own way better than most beginners. Your tactics are really sharp." The compliment from a seasoned competitor did more to boost Sophie's confidence than any amount of encouragement from Noah or Nora could have achieved. She approached her second-round game with renewed enthusiasm and significantly less anxiety. Her second opponent was Emma Rodriguez, a 10-year-old from Denver who played with aggressive flair but less technical accuracy than Marcus. This time, Sophie's natural tactical ability and Noah's endgame training proved decisive. When Emma made a subtle positional error in the middle game, Sophie pounced with a tactical combination that won material and led to a convincing victory. "Yes," Sophie exclaimed softly after Emma resigned, then immediately caught herself and offered a respectful handshake. The joy on her face was radiant, not just because she had won, but because she had executed a complex tactical sequence under tournament pressure. Noah and Nora exchanged glances from the spectator area, both recognizing the significance of Sophie's first tournament victory. It wasn't just about the result. It was about proving to herself that she belonged in this environment. The third round brought Sophie's most challenging opponent yet, David Kim, a 14-year-old from Minneapolis who had been playing competitively for nearly a decade and was considered one of the favorites to win the tournament. David's rating was more than 1,000 points higher than Sophie's, and his reputation for crushing younger opponents was well established. But something remarkable happened during this game. Perhaps because the rating difference was so large that Sophie felt no pressure to win, or perhaps because she had gained confidence from her second-round victory, she played with a freedom and creativity that surprised everyone watching. David opened aggressively, launching an early attack that had overwhelmed many previous opponents. But Sophie defended with remarkable composure, finding resources that even Noah hadn't anticipated during their preparation sessions. When David's attack stalled, Sophie transitioned smoothly into a complex endgame where her recent training with Noah proved invaluable. The game lasted nearly 4 hours, with both players using almost all of their allocated time. In the final position, Sophie managed to create just enough counterplay to force a draw, a result that sent ripples of excitement through the tournament hall. "That was incredible," David said afterward, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "I've never seen someone defend like that in their first tournament. You played like you've been competing for years." Word of Sophie's draw against one of the tournament favorites began to circulate among players and spectators. Chess parents who had initially dismissed the young newcomer now watched her games with genuine interest. Tournament officials noted her remarkable debut performance in their running commentary. But for Sophie, the most meaningful recognition came from Noah and Nora, who greeted her after the game with expressions of pure pride and amazement. "That was the best chess I've ever seen you play," Noah said, his voice thick with emotion. "The way you defended that position, the way you stayed calm under pressure. That was championship-level performance. I felt like I was playing with your voice in my head," Sophie replied, still glowing with excitement from the drawn game. "Every time I wasn't sure what to do, I could hear you explaining the principles we've been studying." As they left the tournament hall that evening, Sophie walking between Noah and Nora with her head held high and her confidence soaring. None of them realized that they had become the center of attention for dozens of chess families who were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something special. The quiet janitor, the brilliant CEO, and the 9-year-old chess prodigy had announced themselves to the regional chess community in the most compelling way possible, through exceptional performance that transcended background, expectations, and conventional preparation. But the tournament was only half over, and the most challenging test still lay ahead. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crisp, autumn clarity that made everything feel possible. Sophie awoke in her hotel room with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy that had become familiar over the past 2 days of tournament play. After her stunning draw against David Kim the previous evening, word had spread throughout the chess community about the 9-year-old newcomer, who was playing far above her experience level. Nora found herself checking her phone obsessively. Not for business updates, a rarity that would have shocked her corporate colleagues, but for messages from Noah, who had spent the evening analyzing Sophie's games and preparing strategy for the final 3 rounds. The tournament had already exceeded every expectation, but the pressure was mounting as Sophie faced increasingly strong opponents, who had begun to take her seriously as a genuine threat. When they arrived at the convention center for day 2, the atmosphere felt noticeably different. Sophie was no longer the anonymous newcomer. She was the story of the tournament. Parents pointed her out to their children. Tournament directors mentioned her remarkable debut in their morning announcements, and several chess coaches approached Noah to compliment his training methods. "It's like being famous," Sophie whispered to Noah as they navigated through the crowd of players and parents. "People keep staring at me." "They're not staring because they think you don't belong here," Noah replied gently. "They're staring because you've earned their respect through your play. That's the best kind of attention a chess player can receive." Sophie's fourth-round opponent was Rebecca Martinez, a 13-year-old from Phoenix who had been playing competitively for 8 years and held multiple state youth titles. Rebecca approached the board with professional confidence, but Sophie noticed something different in her opponent's demeanor. There was no dismissive attitude, no assumption that this would be an easy victory. Rebecca was treating her as a serious opponent, which was both flattering and intimidating. The game that followed was perhaps the most complex and sophisticated chess Sophie had ever played. Rebecca tested her in every phase of the game: opening, preparation, middle game planning, tactical calculation, and endgame technique. But Sophie rose to meet each challenge, drawing on months of intensive study with Noah and displaying a chess maturity that belied her age and experience. The critical moment came in a complex rook endgame where both players had invested nearly all of their time. Sophie found herself in a position that Noah's training had prepared her for perfectly. A technical endgame where precise calculation and patience were more important than tactical fireworks. She maneuvered her king and rook with methodical precision, gradually improving her position while Rebecca's time advantage evaporated under the pressure of defending an increasingly difficult position. When Rebecca finally resigned after nearly 5 hours of play, the applause from spectators was immediate and sustained. Sophie had not just won the game. She had demonstrated master-level endgame technique that impressed even the most experienced coaches in the tournament hall. "That was beautiful chess," Rebecca said during their post-game handshake, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "I've never seen anyone your age play endgames like that. Your coach must be incredible." Sophie beamed with pride, not just for her own performance but for the recognition of Noah's teaching abilities. "He's the best teacher in the world," she replied, without hesitation. From the spectator area, Nora watched Noah's reaction to Sophie's victory and felt her heart swell with emotion. His face showed pure joy and vindication, not just because his student had succeeded, but because his methods and philosophy had been validated at the highest level of youth competition. After 4 rounds, Sophie stood tied for second place in the tournament with 3 points out of 4, a result that would have been unthinkable just 3 days earlier. The chess community was buzzing with speculation about whether she could maintain her extraordinary performance through the final 2 rounds. Round 5 brought Sophie face-to-face with tournament reality in the form of Jennifer Wong, a 15-year-old from Seattle who was considered the strongest player in the competition. Jennifer had been playing competitive chess for over a decade, held multiple national youth titles, and was already being recruited by college chess programs. Her rating was nearly 1,200 points higher than Sophie's provisional ranking, but something remarkable had happened to Sophie over the course of the tournament. The nervous energy that had characterized her early games had transformed into calm confidence. She approached the board against Jennifer not with fear or overwhelming respect, but with genuine excitement about the challenge ahead. The game was a masterpiece of modern chess theory and practical play. Jennifer, recognizing that she couldn't afford to underestimate her young opponent, played with full intensity from the opening move. Sophie responded with the kind of dynamic, creative chess that had become her trademark. creating complications that neutralized Jennifer's theoretical advantages. The position reached a critical juncture in the middle game when Jennifer launched a powerful attack against Sophie's king. For most players, defending such an assault would have been overwhelming. But Sophie had been training for exactly these moments during her preparation with Noah. She found defensive resources that even the tournament's expert commentators hadn't initially seen, slowly turning the tables until Jennifer's attack had exhausted itself. In the resulting endgame, Sophie demonstrated that her victory over Rebecca hadn't been a fluke. Her technique was precise, her calculation accurate, and her patience unwavering. When Jennifer finally offered a draw after 6 hours of intense struggle, the tournament hall erupted in appreciation for both players' exceptional performance. "Can't believe you held that position," Jennifer said afterward, her voice filled with respectful amazement. "I threw everything I had at you, and you just kept finding the right moves. You're going to be a really strong player when you get more experience." With 1 round remaining, Sophie stood alone in second place with 4 points out of 5. The chess world, at least the portion gathered in the convention center, was witnessing something unprecedented. A 9-year-old playing in her first tournament was 1 round away from potentially winning a regional championship against players with decades more experience. The final round opponent was Thomas Rodriguez, a 16-year-old from Denver who had won the tournament twice before and needed only a draw to secure first place. Thomas was a complete player with no obvious weaknesses, and his experience in high-pressure situations gave him significant psychological advantages. But as Sophie sat down for the final game, something profound had shifted in her approach to competition. She was no longer playing to prove herself or to meet external expectations. She was playing for the pure love of the game, for the intellectual challenge, and for the joy of pushing her abilities to their absolute limits. The game was a fitting climax to Sophie's remarkable tournament debut. Thomas played solid, professional chess designed to minimize risks and secure the draw he needed for tournament victory. Sophie responded with the kind of ambitious, creative play that had characterized her entire tournament performance. She created dynamic imbalances, generated tactical complications, and maintained constant pressure throughout the game. The position remained balanced for most of the game, with both players demonstrating exceptional technique and competitive spirit. But in the final hour, with time running low and the tournament championship hanging in the balance, Sophie found one last tactical shot that caught even Thomas off guard. A brilliant queen sacrifice led to a forced checkmate sequence that left the entire tournament hall in stunned silence, followed by thunderous applause. Sophie had not just won the game. She had delivered a knockout blow worthy of the world's strongest players. When the final results were announced, Sophie Lombardi stood atop the podium as regional youth chess champion, having scored an unprecedented 5 points out of 6 in her tournament debut. But the victory was about much more than chess rating points or scholarship prizes. In the awards ceremony that followed, Noah was invited to the podium as Sophie's coach. His acceptance speech was brief but deeply moving, focusing not on chess technique or competitive strategy, but on the importance of recognizing potential in unexpected places and providing support for students who dared to dream beyond their circumstances. 3 months ago, Noah said, his voice carrying across the packed auditorium, Sophie was a girl who loved chess but had never imagined competing at this level. Today, she's proven that talent and dedication can overcome any obstacle. But more importantly, she's reminded all of us why we fell in love with this beautiful game in the first place. Nora watched from the audience with tears streaming down, her face overwhelmed by pride in both Sophie's achievement and Noah's recognition. The man who had quietly supported her family during their darkest hours was now being celebrated as one of the region's most promising chess coaches. But the most meaningful moment came after the official ceremonies concluded. As families gathered their belongings and prepared to leave the convention center, Sophie approached the microphone one final time. "I want to thank my coach Noah Brown," she said, her young voice clear and confident. "But I also want to thank my mom Nora Ricci, who taught me that being different isn't something to hide, it's something to celebrate. And I want everyone to know that Noah isn't just my chess coach. He's going to be the director of the Meridian Youth Foundation, where he'll help kids like me discover what they're capable of achieving." The applause that followed was sustained and heartfelt, recognizing not just Sophie's tournament victory, but the family story that had unfolded over the past 3 days. 3 months later, the Meridian Youth Foundation officially opened its doors. In a renovated building adjacent to Meridian Financial Tower, Noah's office overlooked the same city streets, where he had once walked as a struggling single father. But now he saw them as pathways to opportunity rather than barriers to success. The foundation's first program served over 200 students from underprivileged backgrounds, offering chess instruction, academic tutoring, and mentorship opportunities. Sophie, now ranked among the top junior players in the region, spent her after-school hours helping Noah teach chess to younger students who reminded him of himself at their age, brilliant, eager, and in need of someone who believed in their potential. On quiet evenings, when the foundation's programs had concluded and the staff had gone home, Noah, Nora, and Sophie would gather in the building's comfortable library for their continuing chess sessions. The games were more sophisticated now, the analysis deeper, but the fundamental joy of shared intellectual discovery remained unchanged. "I've been thinking," Sophie said one evening as they analyzed a complex endgame position, "about what you told me before the tournament. About success being measured by how much you learn and whether you maintain your love for the game. What about it?" Noah asked, adjusting the position of a wayward pawn. "I think that's true for life too, not just chess," Sophie replied thoughtfully. "Like Mom learned from being poor and having to struggle, and that made her successful. And you learned from losing your wife and having to start over, and that made you a better teacher. And I'm learning that being different isn't weird. It just means I see things that other people miss." Nora and Noah exchanged glances across the chessboard, both recognizing the wisdom that Sophie had distilled from their collective experiences. "You know what the best part is?" Sophie continued, moving her queen to support a complex attacking formation. "We all found each other by accident, but it doesn't feel like an accident anymore. It feels like we were always supposed to be a family." As the sun set over the city beyond their windows, casting long shadows across the chessboards and comfortable furniture that filled the foundation's library, the three of them continued their game. Outside, the urban landscape sprawled endlessly in all directions, filled with other families searching for connection, other talented individuals waiting for recognition, other stories of second chances and unexpected discoveries. But inside, the warm light of the Meridian Youth Foundation, a janitor who had become a director, a CEO who had remembered her roots, and a 9-year-old chess champion who saw possibilities where others saw only problems, had created something that transcended any individual achievement. They had created a family built on mutual respect, intellectual curiosity, and the unshakable belief that the most powerful moves in life, just like in chess, often come from the most unexpected places. And in the quiet moments between moves, as they contemplated the infinite possibilities contained within 64 squares and 32 pieces, each of them understood that their greatest victory had nothing to do with tournament trophies, or business success, or even chess rating points. Their greatest victory was simply this: they had found each other, and in doing so, they had discovered that the most beautiful games are the ones where everyone wins. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.